Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Forward Progress. I'm Rob Pizzola alongside fellow pro sports bettors Fabian Sommer in Germany, Hitman on the road per usual, probably going sportsbook to sportsbook or something this afternoon, cashing tickets. Hopefully, today's show is a look ahead to the NFL draft on April 27th, both from a general football perspective and also from a betting perspective. We will be taking questions throughout the live stream. So if you want to get involved, the chat is open. You're on the Forward Progress YouTube channel, and we'll try to get as much as we can over the course of the next hour. Suma, start with you. How are things going? Building up a draft portfolio, or still a little bit too early with the offerings that are out there?
Unfortunately, very early. I've got down like a handful of bets so far. Um, Especially the over-under markets have been very disappointing so far. DraftKings has like only 9 posted. Bet Online has posted like 12, but very low limits. So I think last year around the time we had like 35 or 38 players at DraftKings posted already at some decent limits with some fresh accounts. But right now there's really a very poor landscape of over-under markets.
Yeah, Hitman, for you, have you noticed a difference from this year to last? I mean, certainly this is way different than the COVID year where there was like a million props available at this time, but comparing year over to year, how have you found it so far?
A lot less offerings on the apps. In person, a few sports books that I have a relationship with in person have told me that they don't even plan on offering it this year. So, like, for example, like a company like DraftKings, it will be on their app, but at the physical sports book, they plan on not having it at some locations. So it's definitely gotten a lot harder. And what I've kind of done this year is I'm saving a lot of my bullets for the week of 2 weeks before. I'm really not betting anything super early unless I just think it's an amazing play that the line's going to move significantly. So it's been more of a wait and see game for me, and probably in the 2 weeks leading up to it, and especially the week.
Oh, I think we
Oh,
lost
he's gone.
Hitman. We'll get him back in here, but I mean, I know exactly what he's saying. It's just been completely different this year. And I think it changes the mentality in terms of exactly what he says, saving bullets for when markets open up a little bit larger. I mean, we can bet $50, $100 into some of these markets right now. Some people can bet more than others depending on their accounts. But we'll get Hitman back in here. I want to talk to you, and we'll start, Suma, with um, very topical. I know people can listen to us complain about the draft market offerings for weeks, but don't want to do that. Want to stay topical. So this week, first and foremost, huge steam on Bryce Young, up to consensus minus 350-ish to be taken overall. Now, this is a drastic difference from what we have seen in the past as well. Looking at DraftKings Sportsbook right now, minus 360 for Bryce Young. But Bryce Young was favored. Carolina moves up at one point. Then all of a sudden, it's all this news about CJ Stroud's going to go first overall. Market completely switches on a dime. Now all this news leaking that Carolina likes Bryce Young. We get him back to a minus 360 range. So, Suma, are we buying this move essentially? Like, do we think that this is still a low number? Market might come in and this closes at minus 1,000 with more information available? Or is this like maybe we've overmoved at this point just based off of some speculation?
I would say that everything is possible. I mean, in the draft, when Baker Mayfield went first overall, I think at the morning of the draft he was still in the plus 400 range. So we just don't really know anything yet. But when it comes to this Bryce Young move, it feels kind of serious because there were several sources coming out and saying that the Panthers are keying in on Bryce Young, and the Texans are already thinking ahead what they're going to do with their second pick. And then everything started to heat up, and I think Sunday morning it was still in the plus 100 plus 105 range, and then really over the Sunday Monday things started to get heating up. I think this move feels kind of real, but I also think that nobody should be surprised if, let's say, on draft day, all of a sudden CJ Stroud gets steamed based on some fresh new information, on some guarantee log that they're going to take Stroud. But overall, I think this move kind of felt very real.
Yeah, we're going to bring a Hitman back in here as he's reconnected with us. Sorry about Hitman. We lost you for a second there. We're just talking about the Bryce Young steam this week. So looking at the DraftKings book now, minus 360 to be first overall. And I asked Suma if he was buying the move. He's still a little bit uncertain. What's your take on that? All that Bryce Young steam this week?
Yeah, so I haven't bet anything in that market yet. When the trade initially happened, I was hearing from some people that it was probably going to be for Stroud, and obviously the market ended up reflecting that. And then I think it was about a week ago when Young was a small dog, I started to hear some other people saying they were hearing Young, but nobody could tell me anything that was like super concrete where I went ahead and was like, all right, I'm going to fire this, because really for me, my whole thought process on the first pick is that eventually we're going to find out the answer to the test. So it's a matter of if you could just be patient enough. I'd rather lay minus 600 on something that I have close to certainty is going to happen than lay minus 300 on something that is just, I don't know the reason behind the move. So for me, it's kind of a wait and see game. I will say, as I said earlier, that I am starting to hear the sentiment about Young, but nobody said anything to me about like super concrete. And if it was a done deal, it's not a done deal. And if it was a done deal, he wouldn't be minus 300. He would be minus 30,000 right now, because if you knew it was a done deal, you would just keep rebetting it and it's going to win. So obviously there was a reason for the move. People think that he should be the favorite, but is it a done deal at this point? I don't think so. And if it's not close to a done deal, I don't see the reason to lay minus 300, minus 350 now. So for me, it's just more of a wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think we've landed in a range now where it's just like, what are you going to do? This is the range that we're in now. The line has moved based off of what people, the information that became available, but it's nowhere near a certainty yet. So I'm with you on that one. Obviously you had quite a while to get Bryce Young still as an underdog. Other rumblings this week that I want to talk about. And Suma, you mentioned this on your Twitter account this morning, which I woke up to because you're 5 or 6 hours ahead of me in Germany. But I've seen this in private chat groups as well. It's not being super publicly reported via any of the big Twitter personalities or anything like that. But there are a lot of rumblings in the sharper, semi-sharp betting community that Houston is considering passing on a quarterback at number 2. And I'll start with you, Suma. I want your overall thoughts on this, because this hasn't been reflected in the betting markets yet. We have a lot of people talking about it, but the betting markets are still heavily favoring quarterback at number 2. So overall thoughts on the potential of the Texans passing on QB at number 2, and who you would think would be the most likely candidate to go to Houston at 2 if it weren't a quarterback.
Yes. So first of all, if there's going to be strong information that Houston is indeed going to pass on a quarterback, I will accept that. I will respect that. Okay, and probably look to somehow benefit from it. But my personal opinion, as of right now, and I don't think that the betting markets really disagree there, is that it would be completely insane if the Houston Texans punt on quarterback. I mean, they went 3-13, 4-12, 4-12, or 4-13 for 3 straight years. They finally got their head coach of the future, who is going to bring, or is supposed to bring, new energy to the city. They have a top 10 offensive line. Laramie Tunsil, arguably the second best tackle in the league right now. Titus Howard is solid, decent guard duo. They could use another center, but overall, in my opinion, this is a top 10 unit on paper. They signed Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz, 2 veteran options. They're getting some young guys like John Mechie, potentially back from his leukemia. New OC in town. I think you cannot enter training camp with Davis Mills and Case Keenum as your top 2 quarterbacks. I think it's a complete hard sell to the organization, to the fan base. It doesn't make any sense. If you look at the top of the AFC, like the only way you are going to be able to compete in the near future in the AFC is when you hit on one of those quarterbacks. And the Texans are likely going to have the best shot right now, picking second overall. And I also don't buy the narrative that they might trade down and then try to get their quarterback at like pick 7 or 9 or something. That also doesn't make any sense to me. Right now, I'm fully believing that the Texans are going to pick a quarterback at 2. And I might get proven wrong. That's fine. But anything else is basically bullshit to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Now, I would say that it is logical or reasonable that if Houston theoretically has all these quarterbacks graded the same way, right? Which is very possible. I was hearing Eric Eager talk about this a little bit on Sumer Sports, just the way that a lot of teams generally grading quarterbacks this year. There's no one that's separating themselves from the pack. I could see a scenario where they're at number 2 and it's like, okay, we have all these quarterbacks with the exact same grade. Why not try to trade down? I could see that being reasonable. What I don't see being reasonable is keeping the pick and drafting a non-quarterback. And I'm not sure what you think about that, Hitman, but I feel like that's entirely illogical.
Yeah, you read my mind on that. If they're not going to take a quarterback at 2, you absolutely have to trade down. And I know there was some talk it was somebody on Schefter's podcast said that the Texans gave Will Anderson a near perfect draft grade. I don't know how true that is, but you would have to have a defensive end to have a near perfect draft grade if you are going to stay at 2 and not take a quarterback. So I think that it makes total sense that if they don't want a quarterback at 2, that you have to trade out. And let's remember something. This isn't exactly the strongest draft. If you even listen to some talent evaluators talk about Will Anderson, they're like, listen, he's not Von Miller or right. One of these generational, he's not Nick Bosa, one of these generational edge rushers. He really doesn't have the twitch that these guys have in the speed rush. Now he's more of a bull rusher, is what people have been saying. So it really doesn't make sense to stay there too and take a Will Anderson. So I know there's been steam on Will Anderson to go second. I know there's been steam on Tyree Wilson to go second, but I don't see it. I think that just logically you either take a quarterback that you like at 2 or you're going to trade out.
That makes sense. And John brought that up in the chat. What do you guys think of Tyree Wilson, number 2 overall market? Went from plus 2,500 to plus 700. And someone else in the chat, I missed it, but made up a good point. I mean, that literally could have been 3 bets. Doesn't take much for this market to move a 25 to 1. That could have been 3 bets.
I just don't see logically how, if you're Houston, you take Tyree Wilson at 2 instead of trading back to 4. I understand it's with the Colts, which is a division rival of yours. But if you really want to get a Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson, how do you not trade back to 4 or something like that and let the Colts get the quarterback that you deem isn't good enough, that you deem isn't a franchise quarterback? Let them get him, and then you go back to 4 and get one of these guys. So, yeah, I'm personally – some people mentioned to me some stale Anderson and Wilson prices the other day, and it wasn't something that I bet, even at stale numbers.
Yeah. I did get a text this morning about Tyree Wilson. Rising fast per a couple of strong connections. I'm not going to let people know who sent this to me, but this is someone that I would typically value. If we look at the number 2 draft pick market, we see where it is right now, Tyree Wilson plus 700. The point I was going to make is I'd be more likely to take a shot on, if I really like Tyree Wilson and bought into this hype, I would take a shot on him to go top 5 when those markets are open everywhere rather than second overall pick, because I just don't think that the value is there at the second overall pick. I think it's extremely unlikely. So I'm with you guys on that. Let's move on. There's a lot of stuff I want to get to here, and I do want to take some questions from the audience over the course of this live stream. And again, chat's wide open. Bunch of people arguing with each other. What else is new on Forward Progress here in the chat? But you can get in at any time if you do want to get in on the chat, and we will answer questions. I want to talk about a pretty trendy bet. I watched Hit the Books with Brad Powers and Joey Kanish on Monday, who henceforth will be known as Joey Mush. Thanks to Hitman's tweet this morning, which made me laugh. By the way, if you're not subscribed to Hit the Books, I highly recommend doing so. Part of the Hammer Betting Network. If you click the channels here on Forward Progress, Hit the Books is there. Subscribe. Powers, Kanish, every Monday. It's a great show. I shouldn't say that. Hopefully we can delete this clip so Kanish never sees it. But they talked about under 4.5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, which is in the range of minus 155 to minus 165 right now. And it was a bet that was brought up in the chat. It's a bet that people have been DMing me about, asking me my thoughts. So I do want to get your thoughts on this. We'll start with you, Hitman, on this one. Curious what your take is. Under 4.5 quarterbacks taken first round, minus 155, let's say, consensus price. Good bet or not?
So I'll say that I haven't bet either way on it yet, but I would probably lean against Kanish on that. And I would guess, without hearing what his reasoning was, I would guess maybe it's a lot about, in the past, there's been a lot of quarterbacks in that like late first round range that people will start hyping up, and they just never come close to reaching that draft position because everybody just talks about, oh, the 5th-year option, this quarterback will get pushed up, and it doesn't happen. Sam Howell was one of them. Drew Lock was one of them. Malik Willis was one of them. There's been and there's some guys I'm missing that it happens every year. So I would guess, without talking to him, that's what he was talking about with his logic. But I don't know. There's just something about the Hendon Hooker hype that has felt a little bit different than those guys. It's just, there's no on the field breakdown I could give you saying, oh, well, I like Hooker, and it would be irrelevant anyway, what my opinion is on him. But just from reading stuff and trying to read the tea leaves on draft and looking at some of the visits that Hooker's taking, a lot of teams in the late first round or teams that are in the early second round that theoretically could trade up to that 30, 31 spot to take Hooker. Teams like the Lions picking 19, picking early in the second, the Raiders picking early in the second, Tampa, the Vikings, the Titans are picking semi-early in the second. Maybe they could do a trade up, and we know they're interested in quarterbacks potentially. So I don't know. Just the hype around Hooker feels a little bit different, where I'm in wait and see mode on it. And I'll just put it like this. I wouldn't be surprised if he did go first. I think he's a better prospect than some of the guys that I mentioned earlier. He'll go higher than those guys I mentioned earlier. So at the moment, I maybe a gun to head lean over, but nothing I've bet. And I'm certainly not looking to lay juice on the under at this moment.
I mean, I cannot think of a worse situation to be in on draft night than sitting there April 27th. You're watching the draft. You're probably going to have 4 QBs go in like the first 7 picks. And you're going to have the most ultimate sweat of all time with each passing pick, every single trade up that happens. Like, there's good bets, and then there's like also good bets that are fun to root for. This to me is like the absolute disaster, worst rooting interest of all time if you take that bet. Not saying it's not a good one, but Suma, I want your thoughts as well, because it really, I mean, part of the argument that they made, Brad Powers doesn't like Will Levis, period. Neither does Kanish. They think he's not going to be a good pro quarterback. I tend to agree. However, I just don't see him like possibly dropping to the point where he's going to drop out of the first round. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. So it comes down to Hooker. And I think that when there's smoke, there's fire. And there's been so much buzz recently. I would just be really scared of this one, Suma.
Yeah, so the guys who have mocked Hendon Hooker into the first round are Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah, and Bruce Feldman. 3 guys who tend to have some decent sources into the NFL, which I think we should in some way respect. With some recent mocks plugging in Hooker in the first round, I'm currently at 4.3 mean quarterbacks taken in the first round, so I don't see any value in taking the under at minus 160 or minus 155 right now. There was some really, really interesting buzz about Hendon Hooker, like how smart that guy is, and it makes sense to grab the 5th-year option because he's going to rehab his knee over the first 3 or 4 months anyway. So a team like, let's say, Minnesota, Titans, who have like starting quarterbacks who are not supposed to be there for much longer. Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, teams like these make a lot of sense to me.
I love what we get in the chat here. Not back-to-back messages. Hooker not going in round 1. Hooker is going first round for sure. I love the divide. We've also created a divide here between Forward Progress and Hit the Books. I'm kind of with you guys. I do think Hooker is going to go first round somehow. I could see a team trading up for him potentially when there's like this despair. That's the thing too. When you have like this, I guess, 5th ranked quarterback, there's going to be a lot of interest and a lot of teams just trying to jump ahead of others. I don't know. I'm with you guys. I don't think it's a great bet at this moment. Agree to disagree with the Hit the Books crew. Personally, guys, I found it a little bit more difficult to handicap this draft than usual because of the uncertainty with Arizona at number 3 right now. They could use the pick. I doubt they will. If they trade, who's it going to be? Are the Titans going to move up? Could really be anyone that moves up to that spot. And when you have the 3rd overall pick that could go to any team, that really reshuffles everything in the draft in terms of handicapping it. So, Suma, I'll start with you. Do you find that it makes this more difficult for you? And like, what do you do in a situation like this, not knowing what Arizona can do? Do you take a more risk-averse approach to the draft and maybe not load up on all these early picks? How do you approach this?
Yes, basically. So I think what makes it very interesting and kind of difficult is that we have 4 quarterbacks without a typical consensus order. When we remember to 2021, like 5 weeks before the draft, we knew that it's going to be Trevor Lawrence and then Zach Wilson, and then we only had to handicap the 3rd pick and so on. But right now, it's either going to be Bryce Young, probably at 1. Then what are the Texans going to do at the 2nd pick? Are they going to take a quarterback? Are they going to trade out? Yesterday, guys like Michael Lombardi mentioned that they are pretty low on CJ Stroud. Then we got Arizona, who have to trade down. Like this Arizona roster is so talent depleted. They just have to trade down. If you open their depth chart at ourlads.com, you're getting a good laugh because it's very thin out there. So Arizona has to trade down, try to get any future 1st round picks. And then we have the Colts in prime position to fill their need at quarterback. Then we have teams like Las Vegas, Jimmy Garoppolo basically having a 1 to 2 year deal, could take a quarterback. Atlanta, are they really going to stick to Desmond Ridder? The Titans could use another young quarterback. So that makes it very interesting. But I also think that this dynamic might offer some decent betting opportunities when we get closer to the draft.
Hitman, what are your thoughts here in terms of the number 3 pick? Obviously, uncertainty can work in the favor of the bettor as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's great for a betting perspective for me because either I'll find something out or the news will hit and there'll be some prices I could gobble up real quick. So it's great for betting, for handicapping, and for like talking on this show. The uncertainty definitely hurts, but I don't know. I don't think it's as much uncertainty as people think. I think that Arizona's trading the pick. Jeremiah on his podcast with Bucky Brooks recently, he was like speaking of it as if it's like close to a done deal. Yeah, they're going to trade out. And it just makes too much logical sense to trade out with all the holes they have and the fact that it's not a great draft. It really isn't, as I said earlier, a Von Miller, Nick Bosa pass rusher that's going to be available at 3. So I think that it's more of a certainty than people think that them trading out from 3 is going to happen. And I know Will Levis is sitting there at 5-1, 6-1, 7-1 to be the 3rd pick. Maybe worth a small bet because you have to think that if they do end up trading out, it's probably going to end up being Richardson or Levis that goes 3rd. And it's a team trying to jump the Colts to get one of those guys. So despite what pro scout Joey Knish says and Brad Powers on Will Levis, it's more important what the real scouts have to say. So I think that Levis probably goes top 7. Richardson probably goes top 7. And I think that the third pick ends up being a quarterback, if I had to guess.
All right. A few things I want to get to here really quickly. There's about 60 of you watching the stream live right now, which is great news. Smash that like button if you do enjoy the content that we're putting out here on Forward Progress. Helps people find our channel in the future. For all those that are watching live, we are going to end with picks on this show. Suma and Hitman are going to give their favorite bets available at a regulated sports book right now. I can't guarantee that they're going to win, but the likelihood that this is going to move the market is fairly high. We've done this a few times on Forward Progress. We've done it on Hit the Books. So if you are tuning in live, you're probably going to want to get your sportsbook outs open at some point so that you can try to get down on whatever is given out at the end of the show. There's some chatter in the chat about the Eagles. Nick says, feel like Eagles trade down at 30. The organization loves trading down. Eagles fan here, almost a certainty how he trades down. This is actually perfect timing because I filmed an Eagles mock draft with Eric Eager of Sumer Sports. That will be live on this Forward Progress channel tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern time. There's a mock draft dropping today, which is the Kansas City Chiefs, myself and Eric Eager of Sumer Sports. But for those who haven't tuned into the series, it's been myself and fans of other teams. I did a couple with Suma, the New York Jets, and the Seattle Seahawks. There's a playlist right here on the Forward Progress channel of 2023 mock drafts where we put ourselves in the position of the GM and draft for that team. So if you haven't tuned into that series yet, tune into it. I mentioned the Eagles one in particular because it was probably my favorite mock draft so far. They do have 2 picks in the first round. There's a lot of maneuverability there. I think we did some really creative things with the Eagles. So tune into that one tomorrow here on Forward Progress. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit subscribe. You'll get a notification when that video does go out. What I'd like to do here now is, I guess, do some fan service to people who've been firing me DMs with betting questions around the NFL draft. I've been getting a ton. You can always message me on Twitter. My DMs are open, but we'll go rapid fire on these. I won't hold Suma or Hitman to any of these, but just want general thoughts on what we're going to do here. Let's start with Paris Johnson Jr.'s draft position. He's been all over the board. We're looking at DraftKings right now, 10.5, juice to the over, minus 125. Gut lean Suma on Paris Johnson Jr. and where he ends up.
Gut lean, small lean towards the under. But I think Paris Johnson, he's really all over the place. I think everything from 7 to maybe 19, where the Bucks are picking is possible. But I'm leaning towards the upper range. I think he might have a very good spot with the Raiders at 7, who should be in the market for a new offensive tackle. Therefore, we got the Bears at 9. We got the Eagles at 10, who don't need a tackle, but who might trade down. And there might be some other teams who might trade up a few spots to get one of the premier tackles. So gut lean under at 10.5.
Hitman?
Lean towards the under. It's mostly about the fact that I know like his main competition right now for the offensive lineman 1 is Peter Skoronski. And Skoronski is a guy that a lot of teams are going to have on their board as a guard. So, and guard obviously doesn't have the positional value that tackle does. So, I mean, I think that Johnson should be the favorite to be the first offensive lineman off the board. And if that does happen, then he's more likely than not to go in the top 10. So I would say lean towards the under.
Okay, let's look at the first wide receiver market. Eric asked this earlier, thoughts on JSN, first wide receiver. DraftKings showing him minus 225. He's been in and around that range. I've seen some more Quentin Johnston love in the last week or so. I'll start with you, Hitman, on this one. First wide receiver off the board. Do we still think it's JSN? And if so, is there even value at this number right now?
At the moment, I would bet anybody but JSN. So sorry to come in hot like that, but it's not a good wide receiver class. And JSN was more of a slot guy in college. Those guys typically don't get drafted as high in the NFL. A lot of the speed guys have been going really early. Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, a few others that I'm missing. So I would probably say anybody but JSN in a weak class that you could see the first receiver maybe doesn't go to the late teens, early 20s. You tend to get more variance when you're getting that late in the draft. So anybody but JSN would be my pick right now for first wide receiver.
Suma, how about you?
I think Zay Flowers might be in the mix, but the price has really come down. I think one argument against JSN would be that some teams might really not see him as the all-around wide receiver who can do it all. Some teams might see him as that slot receiver who only got the opportunity because Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson have drawn some coverage. So that would be my argument for why a guy like Zay Flowers would go as the first wide receiver. Quentin Johnson, I just don't see it. I think there are too many concerns, and I would not be shocked if he actually falls out of the first round.
Wow. I mean, I could certainly, I think he has a very wide range on where he could go, Quentin Johnson, personally. Let's keep it with a positional market. First tight end selected, Dalton Kincaid favored -155, Michael Mayer +135, Darnell Washington +500. Everyone else would be a super long shot. I've seen arguments for each of the top three that are on the board. We'll start with you on this one, Suma. Anything that stands out to you, first tight end selected a couple weeks before draft day?
Small lean towards Mayer at those odds. I think it's pretty close, a 50-50 affair. Dalton Kincaid got cleared by his doctor today. Mm-hmm. He's cleared for all football activities. And when you look at the mock draft space and takes from Daniel Jeremiah and people like that, I think it's been a pretty close affair, 50-50. And I can see either guy going first. So I think anything above plus 125 is probably the best play here.
Hitman, any thoughts on this market in particular?
I bet Kincaid when he was underdog. I don't got much at the current price on it. I will say, and I mentioned this with the wide receivers, when you're getting into the spot that like guys are going to go in the late teens, 20s, which is probably Kincaid, Mayer range, you typically don't want to lay juice on that stuff because, like I said, as you get later in the draft, a lot of times it just comes down to like team specific fit, and there's a lot more variance. So I wouldn't look to lay on Kincaid right now, even though that was my bet, but that was obviously at an underdog price.
Of course, the price matters when you're taking these bets. People should be very cognizant of that as well in the future. In terms of Stetson Bennett, lots of sports books offering a market on just Stetson Bennett. What round does he get drafted? And I will say, I do mock drafts, as I mentioned, on the clock series here on Forward Progress. And pretty much we get to like the 6th or 7th round of every mock draft. And if I'm partnered up with someone else, they say, out of curiosity, is Stetson Bennett still available in this spot? And we search for him. So I think he's going to get drafted in one of the later rounds, and a lot of teams are looking at it. Round 5 is favored. Hitman, we'll start with you on this one. Stetson Bennett, round drafted. Obviously, there's some pretty big vig in this market, so I'm not necessarily wanting you to force a bet, but if you had to lean somewhere here, where would it be?
I don't know. To be honest, that's probably going to be a bet that I would make the week of the draft. I just think that there'll be better information on what his range is in the week of the draft. I really haven't heard much of any buzz or just people talking about it. Because remember, we're relying on like other experts to tell us when they think a guy will go. Like a Jeremiah will say, I think his range is whatever. And we haven't really heard much about him at the moment. So until we get some more info on him, it's probably a pass. I can't even really give a lean on it.
Fair enough. Suma, any thoughts?
No, he feels like a 6th round guy to me. Like some teams is gonna buy it if they have like multiple 6th round picks or something and try to get a decent backup quarterback, but just no clue at this point.
Okay, fair enough. I like what Hitman said there, and just want to piggyback on something just for the audience as well. But we are not, all of us are fairly successful football bettors on this show, not trying to be arrogant or, pat ourselves on the back or anything. But the draft, we are heavily reliant on news and filtering out what's good news and what's bad news. And you don't have to place all your bets now this week. You can wait till there's more information available. You can act on something quickly. If someone puts a mock draft out that you think holds no credence and it's heavily being bet into market, you can take a stance the opposite, or you can take the stance that I agree with this person, or so on and so forth. So information is very valuable this time of year. Be very cognizant of that. And the last thing I want to touch on here, the most talked about player in my DMs. I barely look at running back markets because I mean, my opinions on running backs being drafted highly tend to stem into like, I don't even really want to look at these markets, but Bijan Robinson is like a very polarizing player. There's odds markets on which team will draft Bijan Robinson. Scroll up here, Jason. I think we're looking. It's right there. Atlanta's favored plus 500. Didn't realize that. Atlanta plus 500, Dallas plus 550. Stuma, we'll start with you. Just looking at the board here, any gut feel on where Bijan Robinson might end up? And the reason I'm asking is because this is a player that a lot of people seem to be wanting to have a bet on in this market. And I think part of it is because the prices are all over the place. You can get 5-1, take back or higher.
I don't like the current price, but it's Atlanta for me. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. Like, run first OC, run first team, highest play action rate last year, highest early down rushing rate. They're returning 4 starters from PFF's number 1 run blocking offensive line. Arthur Smith likes to have his bell cow. I think there's a good argument that Bijan Robinson has a much higher ceiling just athletically than maybe Derrick Henry, because he can also do a lot in the receiving game. So Atlanta likes to go BPA. They did it with Pitts. They took Drake London last year. They have addressed their defense in free agency. Like they've already traded for Jeff Okudah. They signed Jesse Bates. They signed Calais Campbell. They could absolutely use an edge rusher, and in terms of positional value, that would make a lot more sense. But I don't think that the Falcons organization is thinking that way. And Daniel Jeremiah keeps beating the drum that Bijan Robinson might be one of the few blue chip elite players in this draft, independent of positional value. And if that's what the Falcons value, they could easily grab Bijan at 8. I mean, CPAT is 32 years old. Tyler Algier had a 1,000-yard rookie season, but he's a 5th-round pick, so there's no strong commitment there. Bijan at 8 to the Falcons, it makes just perfect sense in my opinion.
Patrick points out, and you mentioned, Suma, that you don't love the price, but the Falcons open 34-1 on Bijan Robinson. Hitman, just gut feel, where do you think he ends up?
Haven't bet it, and typically these markets are something that I try to avoid because I know there's a lot of big payouts, but there is a lot of hidden vig in these markets. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chicago, they didn't add anyone at running back after losing Montgomery, right? Am I wrong on that?
They want to roll with Khalil Herbert as RB1.
Yeah.
At least that's what they said.
Though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 25-1, Chicago is a team that it's kind of, their offense could be run kind of similar to Atlanta, maybe, where they have a mobile quarterback and they can be RPO heavy, run heavy. I mean, Khalil Herbert, I know people like him, but again, he was a late round pick guy going into his 3rd year. I mean, 25-1, maybe worth, not something I'm even going to bet at the moment, but maybe that would be my lean if I had to make one bet on the board.
Yeah, so Deontay Foreman and Travis Homer came over.
The Foreman one, I mean, he is a guy that now you put him with you put Foreman with Khalil Herbert, probably a little unlikely on Bears 25-1 then. So
I get it. I'm sorry to the audience. I'm not exaggerating when I say I don't pay attention to running back stuff, because I don't. Whether it's the draft, the offseason, I'm just being completely honest with you. We'll wrap up with this one from the audience. What's the Okudah trade mean for the draft? Suma, you kind of pointed it out, but I think it kind of just means that potentially offensive player is a possibility for them at this point. I mean, they've addressed a lot in terms of their defense. How likely do you think it is, though, that they would draft an offensive player over a defensive player in the first round?
I mean, if it's a offensive player, I'm having a hard time thinking about a wide receiver potentially, or maybe an offensive lineman. But they extended Caleb McGarry in the offseason, so having a hard time finding some decent fits besides Bijan Robinson. So I think the likeliest scenario for the Falcons is still defensive line, but I think that both defensive line and a guy like Bijan Robinson got a little boost after they traded for Jeff Okudah, because they basically on paper have their two starting outside cornerbacks now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Okudah comes with a lot of concerns. Achilles injury a couple of years ago. He's been injured for 3 years. Never really lived up to the hype of that number 3 overall pick.
Yeah.
I mean, I could still see them going corner is what I'm getting at. I don't know if you agree with me or not, Hitman, but like, I don't think that this trade necessarily changes things, because I don't think Okudah is a player that you are going to bring in and you're like, okay, we got our guy now. We're relying, like, they gave up a 5th round pick for him. They gave up basically nothing. I honestly don't think it alters their draft process at all, personally.
Yeah, I didn't think that it had that big of an impact on either team, to be honest. I was involved with the trade. It's a guy that is going to have his 5th-year option declined, and it's a shot. It's essentially a shot on a guy that has underperformed throughout his career. I'll say with Atlanta is they're, as Suma mentioned with the running back thing, they're an unconventional team. I mean, look at like the usage that like Kyle Pitts was getting last year, and the run rate that they had. They do things a bit different. So I don't think that you're just going to like apply the logic to them. Oh, they need a defensive lineman. They're going to take defensive lineman. I think there's a lot of positions that they could take. It could still be corner. It could obviously be D-line. Maybe it could be an offensive lineman. I don't know, a running back. Like, there's a lot of variance, I think, with the Falcons, just because they're an unconventional team.
Yep, I totally agree with that. So we're going to give everyone a second here or so to have their sports books open, and we're going to get into some bets that people can get down on now if they so choose. Obviously, we track everything here as part of the Hammer Betting Network, all the picks that we give out. As a reminder to everyone, you can always head over to betstamp.app/forward-progress if you want to see the all-time record for this show, if you want to sign up to any regulated sports books. We play at all the sports books listed in our regions. If you're going to sign up for a sports book, do so through our links at betstamp.app/forward-progress. It does help us grow our content further, and we love producing content in general and doing these shows. I know that I do for sure. So I've given everybody about a minute or so to get the sports books open. Suma, we'll start with you. Favorite current bet at a regulated sports book as of now?
Yes. One disclaimer, you will probably not get down too much money on it because the limit is going to be low. I think we have to say that, but the bet that is standing out the most to me right now is at DraftKings, number 2 overall pick, Will Levis at 20-1. And just trying to connect the dots a little bit, Bryce Young got deemed to be the first overall pick. There's some chatter that the Panthers are keying in. So that leaves the Texans with a decision to make. And there's also some rumors that they are not high on CJ Stroud. But at the same time, I still think that the Texans have to go quarterback in this draft and just try to get that rebuild going with a fresh new face. And then I'm coming back to Will Levis, who might very well go into the top 5, top 6 range. And if they don't like CJ Stroud, if they cannot get Bryce Young, Will Levis might end up being their best option at 2. And therefore, I think that the price is a little bit too high at 20-1.
For the audience out there, 20-1, Will Levis, second overall pick. That's an implied probability of 4.8%. So you would need the Texans to or whoever's in that spot, the number 2 spot, could be someone else, to take Will Levis more than 4.8% of the time for that to be a valuable bet. Suma thinks it is. I think that the quarterbacks in this draft from a lot of teams are rated very evenly at the top, and I could see this being more chaotic than people realize. But 20-1, there are better numbers out there as well. We're talking widely available, so on and so forth. So that's what Suma is going with. Hitman, who's been very generous with his time. People that don't know, Hitman's phone overheated in the first minute of this show in his car, so he's got the air conditioning on, trying to keep the phone cool. But Hitman, the people are waiting. Your favorite bet at this time. We're still 2 weeks out from draft. It's not going to be anything crazy, but something that stands out to you.
It would be Devin Witherspoon to be the first corner taken. I was on the train of him being the first corner when it was plus money. It's minus 200 at DraftKings, but I know it's minus 167 at Canby. And I also saw some minus 175s that are out there on it as well. And it really comes down to one. I think that if you read the tea leaves, he's kind of the better prospect. I know Jeremiah has him like maybe 6-7 spots better in his top 50. And then you look at the scheme fit on the teams that might pick a corner early. Detroit and the Raiders, what do they both have in common at 6 and 7? They both are primarily man coverage defenses, and Witherspoon is by far considered to be the better man coverage corner, where Gonzalez is more of he can jack of all trades, does everything, and has a more diverse portfolio. So I think that Witherspoon, since he ran that 4.4240, his stock has been absolutely climbing. And I think, like I said, I think one, he's the better prospect, but two, he's just a better fit for the teams picking 6 and 7. And even if Atlanta takes a corner at 8, just doing some research on their new defensive coordinator, I've heard that they've been hoping to play more man coverage this year as well. So I think that his skill set really fits the teams that are likely to take a corner at 6, 7, or potentially 8.
So first cornerback taken off the board, Devin Witherspoon, minus 167. I have confirmed at Canby Books. So that would be Bet Rivers, Unibet, widely available. And then minus 175 out there, DraftKings minus 200. But we're looking for something in the minus 175 range. Patrick in the chat, all over Spoon at some nice plus prices. I mean, this is a different bet, obviously, because the price matters. But I do get that people like whenever Hitman is on the same side as them as well. And then minus 150 at Bet365 for those who have access. Ontario, New Jersey would be a great price as well. And a reminder, line shopping, we preach it ourselves. We'd love to bet at sportsbooks where we're unlimited forever and we can get down forever. But for us pro bettors, we just like to get down wherever we can. And line shopping is very important, the best prices. So make sure that you do that. And if you are going to sign up for different sports books, as a reminder, betstamp.app/forwardprogress. Click the links through there. It helps support the show. We can do more content. It's a way for us to monetize. And of course, if you haven't clicked the like button yet on the stream, smash that like button. Helps people find this content on YouTube, helps us grow our channel. And if you're not subscribed, just click that subscribe button. If you don't want it to be a nuisance and you don't want to get alerts, you can turn that off on YouTube. You don't have to get notifications or anything, but it helps us grow our channel, helps people find us as well. So hit that subscribe button here on Forward Progress. For myself, Rob Pizzola, for Fabian Sommer at 8:51 p.m. Eastern time or German time, whatever the time is in Germany. Hitman, who was gracious with his time, with his phone overheating, almost blowing up. I hope he doesn't send me a bill for a new phone or anything like that. And our producer, Jason Cooper. This has been Forward Progress on the Hammer Betting Network. We'll catch everyone next time. Peace.